So let's get into some introductions for today. My name is Sandy Mill. I am the admissions tutor for the Arts, Humanities and Social Sciences at Homerton College, responsible for who we admit in a whole bunch of subjects. I am joined by our magnificent Director of Studies in Economics, Dario Palumbo, who's going to be leading the subject content today. And one of our current students, Bruno, will be joining us later on as part of our Q&A. We're going to start with a little bit of a brief overview of admissions on Homerton, which I'll take the lead on. I will pass things over to Dario, who is on my left and maybe on your left as well, we'll see. He'll be leading the subject session, and then for the last half an hour from about 7:30, we'll be getting into Q&A with Dario and Bruno. So hopefully that sounds like it's going to be a useful hour and a half for you. Let's kick things off. Let's get straight into it. Let me hit this button and this one, and we should be all good. So, first slide we've got on here says why Cambridge, and my answer to that always is it's Cambridge. You know, it is one of the best universities in the world, particularly for economics. I know one of the top universities offering this subject. It's got an environment like very few other, with a collegiate system, a highly supportive system where you'll be in a college surrounded by people from across the country, across the globe, studying all different subjects, as well as a few other economists. You know, you've got an environment where you are not just a face in the crowd, but you are going to have academic and pastoral support, you know, all available to you throughout your degree to a really high level. It's one of the top graduate employers. It's blooming Cambridge. You know, there's a reason why people know the name. There's a reason why people want to go here. It's not for everyone. You know, it is a tough degree course, a tough system. We really do push our students as hard as we possibly can. But if you are someone who loves learning to the absolute max, who thinks they're going to thrive in this system of supervisions, discussion and dialogue, this may well be the university for you. And if you like an economics course that does like a bit of maths, I think you're also in the right place as well. I'm sure Deborah will agree on that one. Worth noting the collegiate system, which makes it a little bit different to many other universities. Whereas most universities are a campus, a single big school, effectively, albeit with some stuff that most schools don't have, lecture theatres, a bar, etc. The university really pervades the entire city of Cambridge, and there are two different types of sort of sites and areas within it. You've got the university on one hand and the colleges on the other. Now, the university has many departments offering different subjects as well as some university facilities. But there is a department or a faculty of economics. So I always get this one muddled up.
Faculty in this case.
Faculty. It's always good to make sure I get these things right. So the Faculty of Economics sorts out most of your course content. They'll be sorting out your lectures. They'll be dictating what units and options are available in each year. And you'll be doing that with all of the economists throughout the entire university. Any extra seminars that you might have, reading groups, discussion things, they'll be setting your exams, marking them, giving you your grades afterwards. There'll be an economics library focused only on books to do with economics. Hopefully that sounds like an absolute dream resource. You know, absolutely, a hub for all things economic at Cambridge. On the other hand, we have the colleges. Now, those are the home bases for students, taking a mix of students in different subjects from all across the world. They're in charge of admissions for the university, and they're where you'll have your accommodation, all of the things that you need for day-to-day life, everything from the canteen areas and social spaces to the boring but really important elements of a laundry room and the students' union, all these things that make life work at Cambridge. You'll have a director of studies. Dario is our director of studies in economics, who will help support you and look after your academic growth. You'll have a tutor who helps look after the pastoral side of things. And we also help to organise, or Dario will help to organise the small group teaching in the subject, finding you the right supervisors from across the college and university to help you make most of your studies. But its heart, a college is a community. It is a group of people who all love learning, geeking out about the things they love together, learning from each other, both in the technical academic sense and in the personal sense, growing together, helping one another. And that community isn't just the students, that is the staff, that is our fellows, our academics, everybody working together in order to grow and learn. That's what it's all about when it's working at its absolute best. There are many colleges across the university. All of them are a little bit different. These are different flavors of Cambridge. Homerton, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about a little bit. They're the college that pays me. They're the college that I belong to. There's a reason why I belong here. It's a college that fits me really well. We're a college that combine the old and the new. We've got some older buildings, some of them are Victorian. We've got a long history in education, but we're a new college and very forward thinking in our outlook as much as we can be. We're looking to create positive change. We're looking, to make an impact as much as we can. It's the largest college overall, third largest in terms of undergraduate numbers. We admit around about 180 per year. We take students in all subjects. It's the most diverse community in terms of our number of factors across a whole bunch of things. Most ethnically diverse. We can be the most diverse in terms of a number of sort of social metrics as well. Depends a little bit on the year, that one. We've got accommodation that was, because we're a newer college, that was built with Wi-Fi and flushing toilets in mind, which is not something that all of the older colleges can boast, as well as I believe the highest percentage of ensuite bedrooms available. 83% of our rooms are ensuite. So if that particularly matters to you, it can be important. We're a little bit out of town, but that means we're quieter. No tourists. And it means that we've got all of our students on one site, not at different buildings scattered a little bit throughout the town. That means that our community is together, living together, working together. It really creates a unique community feel. If you're interested, if you're coming to the open days later this week, come down to Homerton, come say hi. We'll show you around a little bit and you'll see just how it is a little bit different to many other colleges. And maybe it's the one for you. We also have our Changemakers program, which is a program designed to help students engage with all sorts of different things to help your development, to help you start getting those big ideas out there. So that's another thing you can look forward to being part of if you'd like to when you're at the college. So yeah, we are technically the newest Cambridge college, even though we've been open for a good couple of centuries technically at this point. And I think I've covered most of the things here. We do have some of the cheapest accommodation in Cambridge, as well as being largely ensuite, which is all a useful thing to have. Yeah. Lots of financial support for home students at Homerton as well. Now, much of this will apply mostly to students who qualify for UK student finance. Some of this may apply for some international students, but there are an amount of grants and scholarships which you may be able to apply for to help support things. For all students, there's music grants, travel grants to allow you to go and learn a musical instrument, or I don't know, if there's a trip that you want to do that you can make a very vague academic case for. There is the Adam Smith Institute, not in the UK, is it? You can find an excuse to go there. We might be able to pay you some money to help you do that. I forget which country it's in, but anything that you can make a vague academic case for, you might be able to get some extra funding for. Grants to help you take up an internship, which maybe isn't paid, but you can get some money to be able to help make sure you can live and take up that opportunity, even if you wouldn't be able to normally. Hardship funds for when things go really wrong, extra support for people who are young carers, who are care experienced. We've got, across Homerton and across Cambridge as a whole, some fantastic support available, including for home students, the Cambridge bursary, which is up to £3,500 a year, which you can receive. It's means tested. You get it automatically if you're on UK student finance. It's money that you don't have to give back. Something that I personally received as a student many moons ago and made a big difference to being able to access Cambridge. So there are opportunities there financially across the board. We're getting towards the sharp end of the application process. Right now, you're going to be thinking about that course that you want to take. Maybe this session today is going to help with that. Choosing your colleges. If I can advise one thing for anyone coming to the open days this week, come in with a plan, come in with a hit list of colleges that you want to see. Do a little bit of research online as to which ones fit you most. Preferably add Homerton to that list as well, maybe to come and visit. You'll be looking at your admissions tests, which for economics is the TMUR, the test of mathematics for university admissions, which you'll need to register for and make sure you prepare very well for. I'm sure that will come up again in the Q&A. Application deadline's October the 15th. Of course, you'll be filling out the My Cambridge application form, taking that to MUA, and if we invite you to interview, that will be in early December this year. Results coming out in January. So it's just a very quick overview of the process there. But I've talked enough. I think I have set things up as the warm-up act for this evening. I get to introduce the headline, the main event, um, and let him take the reins in terms of introducing you to a subject that you may or may not have had the opportunity to study at school, but is an absolutely fascinating one. I'm going to hand you over to Dario to lead this subject taster session this evening. Dario.
Sure. All right. So welcome everybody. So Sandy says I'm actually the director of studies in economics here, and what is a director of studies? A person which you overlook so your academics all across, your career at Cambridge and Homerton eventually. And so let me just put up something around because like one of the reason why make me do this is because of course I can try to explain what economics is, particularly at Cambridge, and I would say Homerton slightly, because it's not only what I'm gonna give you here is a brief introduction of what it looks like economics at Cambridge, but of course more also what we tend to do a little bit at Homerton. So just to clarify, so as Andy said, we actually have lectures which are run by the faculty and everything is run by the faculty, but what is the point is that you are basically based at Homerton. And being based at Homerton, you'll do all these extra classes called supervisions with either me or my colleagues. The two more people at the moment in the economics team, Juliana Cavalcanti, which takes care of the macroeconomics part, and Kasia, has been Kansieva, I always mess up the name, but she's actually taking care of the microeconomics part. So usually these are the two components. I take care of the quantitative subjects and of the admissions. So just to give you an idea, I mean, what is the just to motivate you on doing economics in general, and particularly at us, is that why is economics and such an important thing? Well, economics, as you all imagine, is actually something very important for our life. I don't need to explain. It's not only because of jobs in the future is probably the subject that gives you among the highest pay with engineer, after you graduate. But it's not only with that. Of course, being economists, we think also about this, but at the end of the day, what we care most is to give an impact to the society. So it's a way to analyze the problems which happens across the society from a different aspect. And most of these are proper economics and growth problems that have to do with interest rates, tax, wealth, inflations. And what we do here at Cambridge, we provide you with the tools to analyze and assess these things. And then eventually you will end up in these big firms, which eventually actually are very well paid. But after that, the other options will continue into policy making. I have many colleagues which continued in central banking and even academia at the end of the day. So it's a remarkable time. It's actually one of the places which educates the best towards this type of careers. So as you said, what is this? Is anything which we think about is all about money, but to be honest, more about policy, right? Trying to understand things, how the various aspects of society interlink with each other. And we do this as opposed to sociologists or studies political science. We try to understand this from a quantitative perspective, right? So we try to create relations and try to analyze them in the society. So, as I was saying, I mentioned these random words, but for people that don't know this, economics is mostly divided in three fields, which we say microeconomics, macroeconomics, and econometrics. So, microeconomics is what everybody thinks it has to do with basically the micro part, so the individual. So, how each individual interacts in a society and will make decisions which eventually have an influence in their wealth and utility eventually. The macroeconomics aspect is how you take these things and bring it to a broader level. So it's not only two individuals, how do they interact? So consumption, let's say a consumer and a producer is how many people in a society, in a nation will tend to interact. Simple example is how, if everybody's a rational thinker and behaves in the same way as a country, what do we tend to do? We tend to import, we tend to export. And very most importantly is what is the planner or the social planner has to do in such a society. So particularly, the choices related to investment, tax regimes, and everything has an impact on how society behaves. So all the firms will tend to interact, all the workers will actually earn their money, and eventually they will invest, consume, or they will save. And all these things are, what we consider as macroeconomics. And eventually this whole field goes into the financial markets if some of you is interested. And econometrics. What is econometrics? Well, to be honest, as my former supervisor used to say, is an excuse for a statistician to be in economics department, but for a main reason, because as you say, we do this quantitatively. And one of the things is to, define models and how these, using mathematical tools to describe how the interaction of the variables exists. And the other thing is to look at data and how to infer if this model do actually work. And there's a lot of work to do with statistical modeling of variables and understanding this. But even when you don't have a model, I'll give an example later. So the idea is that in any case, the program is among, the one presented at Cambridge is among the most quantitative ones. So I'm stressing this quantitative aspect because that's actually what economics here is. So you have to be honest, you will go through lots of mathematics courses, statistics, probability, and anything related to that. So all these things are quite, very important. By the way, I've just seen someone's been raising a hand. What I would suggest is that probably, Sandy, if you agree, if you just put the questions on the chat, then we probably answer them later. Would that work?
Yes, please. Yes, please. Questions in the Q&A, please. We won't be, just because the number of people we've got here, we won't be doing hands up or anything like that. The easiest thing, just to keep track of things, is to pop your questions in the Q&A function, please. I've answered a couple of ones with written answers, especially where they're a bit more niche ones. We'll go for more general questions when we get to the Q&A.
So the one I want to, discourage you from asking questions, but please just put them in the chat. That would be the easiest thing, because then we try to pick them up all from there. So as I said, this journal includes, as I said, many topics, which quantitative topics, which have to do. We need to know about optimization, we need to know about derivatives, we need to know about dynamic systems, and we need to know about statistics and probability. Right. So what do we actually want from you now, given the fact? We like to see, for instance, an interview in general. What I care is not that you are an economics expert, you're already lined up for the next Nobel Prize in economics. What I care, to be honest, is a genuine interest in the subject, a good grasp of the relevant A levels, which, are mostly quantitative at this point of view, but of course, good grasp of economics is definitely something that will still be valuable. But the important thing is that, being able to tackle problems, being able to, have a critical thinking toward the problem. And to be honest, as we always like to say, in an interview, we don't care about the right answer. There are certain answers which has to be done, but the problem is more a matter of how you think. So practicing problems and trying to make a story or valid story around it, right? And as I said, important things, we'll take it, truly in an unfamiliar setting. You will see questions you haven't seen, so don't be surprised. Right, so the idea, as I said, what we care in general is about, the idea of understanding relationships in society. So this is what this type of work that we do. And as an example, typical example is what is the effect of income. So the impact of education on your future wages, right? These are typical questions, these are microeconomics type of question, which still gets you an idea. These are time series on how, different type of degrees would have given a different point in time a certain wage. And there's a relationship, maybe clearly there's a high relationship, but there's also an effect in gender, as we all know, right? So there's a steeper curve for, females as opposed to effectively, males historically for other reasons. But these, understanding this relationship is something that we try to do. We try them to do, as I said, they're setting up a model a priori, but the last part, which is the statistical and econometrics parts, we try to look at this data, we try to infer, if there is a relationship, right? Another famous relationship we look at, financial markets. So I can imagine, you can see this graph and things, there is effectively potentially a relationship within the price of oil on the markets and the Forex, US dollar value, right? So people, they tend to consider that the USD tends to be higher when the level of crude oil tends to be lower, and there's the other way around. And we try to understand if there's an effective inverse relationship or not. This is something very important. But, since we just don't look at graphs, if you've only been looking at graphs, you could think that this could be a relationship, but, maybe also this is a relationship, right? So probably, popularity of the first name Brooklyn in the US and UFO sighting in Kentucky. If you look at graphs, it looks like there's a relationship here, right? Maybe causal. Which way around would be interesting. Or I don't know, maybe distance between Uranus and Saturn and nuclear power generation in Brazil, as you can see. So I can throw you many of these, burglaries in Oregon and view ship counts of day of our lives, for example, right? So if it's just a matter of looking at graphs, it's not, and there's another one more, per capita consumption of margarine and divorce rate in May. So, it's not just a matter about looking at graphs and try to say, oh, there is a relationship here. We need to have the tools, and we're going to teach you the tools, to actually see if this is a real relationship, is it not spurious, as we tend to call, so fake relationship, as we know this, just randomly found, And how to interpret that. That's the important last bit. We are not on a mathematics faculty. We don't work with tools. We work with the tools and we bring them into society. For your reference, anyway, all this very funny correlation comes from these websites, which is called spurious correlation of Tyler-Regen. And actually, it always allows you also to generate random papers out of it, so it's quite fun. So you'll see if the AI is better at you at creating a story around spurious correlations. But in truth, I mean, all I want to say is that one of the important things, as I said, when we do this type of job, is trying to distinguish between, the presence of a correlation and the presence of a causality, which is not a spurious correlation just induced by the data, but there's a story behind. And usually, in this case, it's not just a matter about making a rationale behind it, because you can always make a rationale. I mean, I said AI here can generate as many papers as you want of why this relationship could be good, right? But it's a matter about statistically and completely with a scientific method trying to understand that. And in order to do that, we need to have a statistical and probabilistic background around it we're going to give you. And we're going to bring them into actual applications. So to give you a small example of what we do, I mean, just to dive into what we study during the first year. In the first year, there's I work with quantitative methods courses, and you will go through, I say, probability and statistics. Some of you have done this. This is a very simple framework where we introduce simple probability. So we're going to study the concept of simple probability, as you're understanding what is the probability of a certain set. So for instance, dice roll as this example, and what is the probability of having a certain numbers out of it. But why this is simple? Well, this actually helps in to building up the milestones to bring up to the problem we just encountered. So this is, as I said, is a basic framework which eventually you might have encountered or not. But this is also a very good framework to understand logical thinking. And this is actually the type of things I might be testing you about, for example, is an idea. So for instance, a sample question you might get given, which clearly is not going to be this one, obviously, because you see it. What's the probability in a room of 25 people, these two people share the same birthday? Now, you could use the framework I just introduced it to you, but since it's something we teach you, it's not only about that. It's a matter about, probably if you don't know the tools, it's fine still, but we need to have a framework, a logic to go around, right? So that's what we know in general about probabilities, that probably in most of the cases, checking the probability of a certain outcome is inversely related to the probability of the opposite. So if the probability of rain today is 60%, what's the probability is not going to rain today is 1 minus that one, so 40%, obviously, right? Sometimes working with the probability the other way around helps. This is a way to solve this problem. And as we say, in order to solve it, in the example I showed you here, you don't need to go through all the rigorous probability or Bayes theorem framework. You can just, think about counting, think about how to twist the question around, and this is actually a valid mathematical tool already, right? And this is a solution. So the idea is that you would count it backward of the probability that you start off from a simple problem. In the room, there are two people. Okay, so if there are two people, what's the probability they share the same birthday? Okay, if they share the same birthday, there's only one day they can share, 1 out of 365. If we work the other way around, what is 364 out of 365? Now, so this is the probability they don't share a birthday. What about if there's a third person in the room, right? So we need that the first two people not born on the same day, and the third person should not be born in the same day of either of the two. So then how many days is this guy available? 363 days available, or 365, and so on, up to get 25 people. And then you can actually construct these probabilities as they are, and then you can actually solve the problem. The point is not to get a number, right? It's just to understand the logic behind it, right? And that's where your fun information tend to rise extremely up. If it starts off at 23 people, it's actually 50%. So it's quite high. I don't believe. That is one of the funny things about maths. Right, another example of a problem of this form, you might have seen it before, the famous Monty Hall problem. I don't know, it was very popular, around probably 20 years ago, because it came out on an actual game show in the UK. And what it is, it's the famous game. There is a host presenter, a TV show, and there are these participants, and then you get shown 3 doors, and you say, okay, behind one of these doors is a car, and behind the other 2 there's a goat. So the host of the show asks you which door you pick, and then you pick a door. But then after you pick the door, what the guy does is it shows you one of the other 2 doors and shows it as a goat. And it tells you, do you want to stick with your choice or you want to change it? Now, this is a very, rigorous problem which has been sorted in more than one occasion. It was shown also on TV and also in movies. But there's a rigorous proof on how to solve this problem. It's not that you need the proof, but you need to understand what would you do in such a framework and why an uncertain answer could be correct. Turns out that the answer is to change, and the reason is very simple, because if I can be in either one of these three scenarios, right? Let's just say I pick the door one. If I pick the door one, the car can be either behind door three, door two, or door one, so the one I picked. So in the first scenario, if the car is behind door three, then I pick door one, and then the host is showing me the goat. So what does it mean? Is that behind the door which is not open, there's the car. And if I switch, then I win, right? In the second case, I have the door, the car is behind the second door. It's still the host is showing me the goats. So if he's showing me the goats, then the remaining door has the car and I win, right? In the third scenario, unfortunately, well, I was very lucky at the beginning because I picked the car from the very beginning. But then there are two doors left. So either of the two could be open and show me a goat. And in that case, if I switch, then I lose. But what does it mean in that? In two scenarios out of three, if I switch the door, eventually I win. So this is just simple logic, which can exploit the probability framework in a looser way, which can be used to actually test the understanding of logical thinking, right? So anyway, just an example. This is not, it's not only that. We don't only work with doors and decisions. At the end of the day, the probabilistic tool becomes very important, particularly in finance. And as you can see, this is an example because I tend to forecast GDPs or any financial markets. I need to have an understanding of what this forecast could be. What is the prediction error in the forecast? So how good am I forecast? And I can construct what I call probabilistic intervals around. And this is super important because particularly, look at here, this is GDP observation, and these actually as policymakers, we want to make choices, tax choice, fiscal choices, which will actually reflect what is our prediction on, well, an accurate prediction of inflation as much as how a country grows. So all these are effective tools you will learn at some point in your study, which eventually are used in practice by central banker, and they need this probabilistic framework behind, which is very important, working directly with data. Another one which you might know, this is directly financial markets. This is volatility modeling. And now there's a very complicated model behind this, but towards the end of your study, you will even start working with financial data. And as you can imagine, they're very much in demand, from lots of private sector, and also, as I said, from academia as well. And from a regulation perspective, because of course, the world becomes much more complex and automated, and we need to put regulations on what is the efficiency of markets, right? So, in general, what we need to do, we need to construct models, effectively, which will allow us to study certain aspects of our society. 1 second, this is frozen. Oh, now it works. Okay. So, then what the economist does in all this framework puts mathematical models around and tries to put things, and try to make try to describe a story with a mathematical model which you will be accepting. Given certain assumptions, something happens. It's not just I create a story because I invented it, but just because effectively I can see that there is a relationship with certain variables and I can try to replicate that. So the tool is to try to understand what are the relationship, how do they work, even constructing a model or studying them from a statistical perspective, right? So an example, this is just something you will encounter, is like this is what is called Each-Wolf box, which is basically is an economy where there are only two people, right? So there is a guy, gender neutral. There are two types of humans which they produce and consume at the same time. So they produce and the other person consumes what the other person has produced. So the question is that what is the optimal amount which should be produced, given the fact that this is exchange economy? And eventually, what is the optimal price? And this depends not only on certain amounts, but depends on what is the utility, so these blue and red lines, that these agents have. So what is their desire towards producing and consuming. And an equilibrium, which I mentioned is everything about equilibrium in economics, is actually reached when both of them are satisfied enough given the other action, right? And this is actually, as I said, it's a mathematical tool to describe interactions between people, and this is actually a very, very, very important aspect of economics. Of course, this works very easily on a micro level, but, also has been, these simple models tend to be extremely helpful. For example, you can imagine, you might have maybe heard or maybe watched a movie which is called The Beautiful Mind, about this very great man, which was John Nash, which invented, well, he theorized, didn't invent, the concept of game theory. It was originally defined by John von Neumann, which actually helped us in the famous Manhattan Project, and he tried to define what are the strategic reactions that countries should take during a war. Actually, the decision of bombing or not bombing Japan was actually out of part of their studies. So these simple decision models, which are mathematical models, actually have a very strong impact in how you interpret certain interactions, which are used every day in bargaining, in competition aspects within firms, but as I said, even at a country level, right? And an example, I mean, just to give an introduction, this is quite a very interesting theory, which is mathematics, right, at the end of the day. There's a logic which can be formalized with mathematics. So it's a game, right? I mean, everybody knows the idea of a game, but if you think about game theory, I mean, a simple game is a situation, is a framework in which you have two players, right? There's a limited number of actions that each player can take, and then there is an outcome given this action. So a simple example here is called the first date game, which could actually, be an example we could put up in an interview. It's called first date because you have two players, right? So there is someone which is taking someone else on a date, and of course, he's inviting this person on a date and has to choose what type of activities is to propose during this date. So the activities now is limited, say either having a coffee, which is a safe activity, or an exciting activity. What is the problem is that if you are proposing someone's a date, you don't know what the person eventually on the other side is, if he's a safe activity person like, or an exciting activity. And actually this will define what, eventually the way the date is going to go, right? So you could even propose one of the two, but there is eventually a payoff attached to it, which depends on how the date goes, right? So for an example, let's try to do the idea. This would be an example of a payoff matrix on the outcome of the game, right? So each of these two persons, right? So either you or the other person have either two preference towards certain choices, right? So you say coffee and water park. What are inside the squares effectively are what are your preference. So effectively, the amount of your utility given the combination of the choice for both. So if you read actually the squares, the left number in each of the square is actually related to Miss or Mr. Right, or Miss, or complete gender neutral, and the right one actually is divided. It has to do with your payoff given certain choice. So what is that? Let's try to specify an example. If both of you and the person you put on a date will actually decide to like coffee, right, and you propose to go for a coffee, both of you will be excited, you actually be happy because you're both potentially safe type person, and then you will actually have a positive gain, right? Same story for with water park, just to make it a bit more interesting. I didn't put exactly the same numbers, but the idea is that both of you have a positive payoff given the fact that you agree and you both like the same thing. On the other hand, if you are a water park type of person and the other person effectively maybe is a quieter person, a coffee person, there, as I say, if you propose them to go to water park, maybe they don't get much of a benefit out of that, and you might actually be worse off because the date you think is not going well because you propose something the other person doesn't necessarily like, right? And eventually you get a negative outcome. Same story the other way around. So what would have been this case? The idea is that it's a matter about making the right decision, knowing what the other person would choose. That would be the outcome of the game. So just to give you an idea, I mean, as I described before, I mean, the game is defined by players, strategies, which could be either coffee or water park. The outcome is what is the outcome of the payoff we just described. And the payoff are exactly the sum of eventually the outcome each of the person defines, right? So it's defined exactly by this setup here. What is the important point is that the games can be played, exist, and they're theorized, even by Nash at the time. But the idea that there exist complete information games where everybody knows everybody else's actions and everybody else payoffs, effectively, right? But they're also incomplete information. Players are uncertain about the other profiles. They don't know what is their payoff. They don't know what would they like, right? So the story goes there is that if everybody would know, disclosing what they like, at the end of the day, everybody would be keen on trying to get the outcome, which eventually would bring both each other's payoff extremely high. Eventually, this doesn't happen if we don't know this, their other strategies. So we have to work about the idea of best response. What does it mean is that what would be my best response if their strategy would be either one or the other one? For example, let's assume that the other person bringing on the date is either a coffee person, right? If this is a person, you might be better off in proposing a coffee rather than a water park because your payoff is high. Now, in the opposite case, you would prefer a water park because the other person is a water park. So you both agree in the same type of idea, right? What happens the other way around is that, for the other person, it's the same, right? So if you are a coffee or you propose a water park, if they would prefer a coffee, you prefer a coffee rather than the water park because they all want to agree, reaching the highest payoff for both of the people. And when eventually these equilibriums are reached, these are effectively called Nash equilibria. So in this case, the Nash equilibria are effectively when both of them proposes coffee and both of them propose water park. Because there's no incentive if the other one choose a choice and you choose your choice, then to switch to another choice once your information is revealed. So effectively, you will stick with your own choice given the other choice. And this means that this creates an equilibrium where there's no deviation, effectively, right? And this is actually a way how to study the games. The problem is that in reality, this never happens because you don't have necessarily the opportunity in real life to go back in your choice and think, what would you have done otherwise? And therefore, in reality, these are solved probabilistically. But this is something you will learn over time. But it's called a mixed equilibrium games. But anyway, this is an example of something you will learn during first year, which is a very simple, use a simple logic, which can be put there, which we will formalize, right? So I'll just say the idea that the games tend to be sequential sometimes. So it means that, not everybody chooses at the same time, but that one chooses before than another person. And then it creates this tree structure, which effectively you would do, okay, given the choice of the person who's done before, what did I do? And then what the other person does. And this can go on consecutive, right? And this is another example the games happens, right? Usually, unfortunately, it happens in period of war, right? Is one person make an action, the other person does another action, and given the action taken by the previous person, what would be your best response? And this iterates at every stage, right? But a very simple example of this is actually competition, right? What is your strategic best choice in a market, given that you have competitors which you're competing on selling the same product. So this is another simple example. It's called your selling model, right? So there are simply two ice cream vendors on a beach, right, which sell exactly the same ice cream, right? And the beach is a certain, let's say a mile long, right? The question is that given the fact that every person, the customers are scattered equally across the beach, right? So they tend to all go towards the vendor which is the closest to them, right? So if you would collude with your street vendor, you would have perfect information. You would think that probably the best option is to split the beach in two. And where would you put, given the fact that moving along the beach for yourself is actually costly? You would place, in these exact 2 points, and then it means that you're sharing equally the beach among the two, and you don't need to move much from across. These are an actual equilibrium. This is an example of an actual equilibrium, for example, right? But what happens on imperfect information means you don't know what the other would do, you don't know what you would behind, so you have to act sequentially. So you both start off at the opposite side of the beach, right? And you are sharing still half of the beach in that case, right? In non-moving. But what about if your oppositor moves let's say 10 meters towards your direction, right? So what happens is that then he will have a higher share of the market. More people will actually go to him than to you, and you'll be worse off. So you would be incentivized at the same time to move one step forward, and then and then the opposite would be incentivized to do the same until you reach the center of the beach, where everybody can equally go either to you or the other one, and you are 100% competing. So you're constantly competing. You're not splitting the most efficient way the beach within yourself just because you don't know economics, right? Because at the end of it, you reach the same outcome because you're splitting half of the beach with much, much more effort, right? And this is just created by the fact that you have imperfect competition, right? You have imperfect information. And this is an example of a game which will eventually, comes into studies, right? Anyway, just to wrap up all these many things I've given to you. I mean, the idea is that when what we do in economics is basically we tend to use mathematical models in the social science setting. So we don't tend to just study the social phenomenon. We just tend to try to give, a reason which is a rigorous reason, trying to put assumptions, and given assumption, we try to, which obviously can be wrong, right? But again, given this assumption, we try to describe a phenomenon will implicitly be always a simplifying model, because at the end of the day, we don't aim to describe the brain of people, with a simple equation of two variables. But the idea is that sometimes using simpler model helps you to have an understanding of what is the broader phenomenon. And the idea is what we want to teach you is this approach at modeling, putting things in framework. And these are what the things I also care when I'm trying to assess for a person which is suitable for a course, if he's eager and interested in doing this, because it's the most important point. As I said, this relationship can always be helpful, given actually because tends to have very big implication, even in the model is simple, as I said, war times, competitions, and stuff like that. And ultimately, we want, since you learning how to create models, you learn how to have a critical thinking about models and the outcomes that you receive and get thrown at you. You will be able better interpret and criticize modern technological tools, like, for example, AI. The idea is that our society is going to be futurely shaped by ChatGPT or LLMs as a consequence. Well, we hope that this is not the case, right? Because we still want to give you critical thinking, and you will be able to tell when the machine is wrong, so that machinery becomes better. But eventually, you will have your own critical thinking, because you will think in the same way potential machine does, not as fast as an LLM would do, but at least clearly the idea is the same, right? Right, so I hope you have been made sure to be interested a little bit about economics and what we do here at Cambridge. And if you have, I guess now, I think there's a Q&A question now, Sandy, how does it work?
So we have got many, many questions
Right,
coming
I
in.
switched off the thing, so let's have a look.
Yeah, if you switch off the screen share, and then we can kind of go at it right here. So what I will do is I've got the question and answers opened up on my screen here. Forgive me if I look down slightly. If you've got any more questions, please pop them in to the Q&A function. We will have one of our fantastic current students joining us very shortly as well. So if you've got any questions about student life at Cambridge, about what it's like to study economics here, we will save those for when Bruno gets here. But we've got some admissions related ones and some subject related ones for Dario and myself that we can get started with. We'll start with this one. Why do some colleges ask for further maths? And is the course content different between colleges as a result?
Okay, so the story is the following. Is this one? As I said, we tend to have a very but as I said, probably the most quantitative economics subjects across the country. So we know that the level is high, and of course, despite sometimes there's no real formality or consensus on the requirement. All of us we tend to prefer people which have done further math. So I don't want to discourage people because, of course, eventually there's an interview, but we tend to see that these actually tends to be passed on to the students which apply in a way that they tend to have been self-selected towards that. At least they have an appreciation and they are ready about what is going to happen, because the worst thing that would have happened is that you arrive here and effectively you're completely lost because the level is too high. So it's not that we don't take it as, I'm sorry, we're not trying to be bad or anything, but clearly we just want to make sure that you will be ready when you arrive here. This is the point, right? Because unfortunately I don't set the syllabus. There's been the standard is what it is. And as I said, so to wrap it up, it's not necessary, it's preferable. That's pretty much the idea, right? But as I said, don't be surprised, if the college tend to have a strong requirement for that.
If you are doing further mathematics, make sure you do as well as in it as possible. There we go. I can do words. If you're currently choosing your A-levels, if you can take further mathematics, you should. And it may influence your decision about where you go to sixth form. If you're unable to take further mathematics, please make sure that your teachers mention that you're unable to do it in their reference, because we know that not all schools do offer it as well. So, but if your school does offer it, it's great to see some strong performance in that will really help. Someone's asked, are 3 A-levels in maths, further maths and economics a good subject combination? Would you advise 4 A-levels if you're taking further maths? We commonly see 4 A-levels when people are taking further maths, but it's not necessary. have a think about what you're capable of doing. 4 A levels is more than 3. It is more work. Obviously, it's more impressive if you can do 4, but not everyone has got the capacity in order to do that. That being said, we most commonly see it where mathematics and further maths have been taken, because if you're really good at further maths, A-level maths is usually fairly easy. And it may be that in that sort of case, we might ask for an A star in the further mathematics to make sure you've got the math skills and you're able to deal with the workload that we're after. The Tamua. Is there any specific study guide for the Tamua, or a way that you would recommend people to study?
At the end of the day, is solving problems, right? So there's no effective way, as you pointed out, but the idea is that if you would practice problem solving, if you're passionate about these problems I've discussed, this clearly helps in any way. But at the end of the day, these are type of tests which are set to define pretty much a profile. They don't test particularly your knowledge, but clearly knowing quantitative subject, this will help for sure.
Yeah. And it's where a couple of people asked what a good Tamura score or necessary Tamura score is, and it does vary year on year.
Yeah.
We look at people in context of the field of applicants that was applied in that particular year, and we also look at them in their own educational context as well. We know some people will have been to schools that are stronger or will help people prepare more than others. So we also look at everything contextually as part of this. The key is to do as well as you can. Get as high a score as possible, as that will absolutely help when you're coming to the application. We do use it as part of deselection. So we want to see what would be a strong score for you as part of that. It's certainly more important than the personal statement in that regard. We do look at the personal statement. We may use that as part of an interview, but the Tamura score is really important in our early application process. Prepare well for it. Go online. If you search Tamura, there are practice papers, practice materials, everything that you need online in order to get yourself set up for that. If you normally receive extra time in your examinations, you will get that for the Tamura as well, but you need to make sure you register and let Pearson VUE, the company who deal with this, know about your extra arrangements or if you have access needs. And above all, my advice here is look at the tactics of the test. Know how many questions that there are to answer and how long you can spend on each one. Make sure you answer all the questions. This is not the UK Maths Challenge. There are no negative marks on the Tamura. So make sure you answer all the questions. And as well as that, think very carefully. This is a multiple choice examination. If you're really running out of time, can you eliminate a couple of answers? And then know that you've got better odds if you have to make a guess with it at the end. It's much better, rather than spending 10 minutes racing through and guessing the last few questions, to spend 20 minutes and eliminate a couple of answers. You could turn your 25% chance on those last questions of getting the right answer to a 50% chance, just with a little bit of thought and a little bit of early mathematical reasoning. I think that's think about the tactics of the test is really important. Do you agree with that, Dario? Have I said anything there?
Yeah, 100%. As I said, I mean, beyond the official material, there's nothing more beyond, like we can actually say, but practice this type of problems. And, the strategies about the test clearly are the way. As I said, practice the things that gets you better, understanding it is you learning even here, understanding how the structure of exams work is the best way actually to, achieve. At least is one of the components, sure, right?
Someone's asked, I'll answer this one very quickly. I've just spotted this while scrolling past. Why is the acceptance rate so low for economics? Is this because you don't have many places or too many applications? And the answer is a lot of applications per place that we have. We are limited at Cambridge by the number of bedrooms we have in the colleges and the amount of space that we have in the lecture theatres. It's a popular course for all the reasons that Dario was saying earlier. So therefore, that makes it a tough battle. That's why we have to do all of the parts of the interview, of the application process, to make sure that we can deal with that large number of applicants and make the decisions about who's going to learn best in the Cambridge environment, learn in the ways that we teach, through our supervisions, through our seminars, through our lectures, etc. There's quite a few questions about interviews, and I'm going to come to those in a little bit. I will answer those, folks. We will go into that. I'm going to wait until we've got Bruno here to talk a little bit about his interview experience as well. So we'll deal with some of the more technical admissions questions first, before we get into that end of things, but we will absolutely look at that. Someone's asked, are certain colleges known for excelling at economics? Does this make it harder to get in them? Almost, I think every college offers economics. I'm not sure if there's one that doesn't. I can't think of one offhand. And all colleges are a mix of different subjects. So, pick a college that fits you best, even if that is a popular college in that particular year. We have a system called the pools, in which we can shuffle applicants between colleges where there are lots of strong applicants to colleges where maybe they haven't received as many or as strong applicants in a given year. So choose your college based on where you think fits you best. Any other facilities or little things that you can get from them that fit you the best would be what I would say. Don't worry too much about trying to game the system. And I know that's a hard thing to say after we've been talking about game theory and picking the right door. But putting your energy into strengthening the application is the best way of giving yourself the best chances, rather than trying to work out how you can mathematically raise your odds to the very best level. It's not worth doing. Someone's asked, would doing an internship in finance improve the application? What do you think, Daria?
Well, to be honest, not the application. I mean, despite, clearly we like to see an interest. It's something is a story you can always talk about. But I don't say that, the people which have an internship in the field will definitely get in and the other way they don't. I mean, clearly it's not determining things. Actually happens the other way around. Clearly, being in economics, will probably help you to get one of these. But as I said, I mean, at the end of the day, we want true motivation. And, true motivation will come from an example that comes from one of your internship project you have done or something shows motivation. But it's not only that. I mean, if you've done your own project, you've done your own studies. So yeah, bottom line, we don't prefer particularly someone which has an internship.
I think it's key that this is an academic economics course. We don't just want people who want to be in finance. We want people who want to study economics. And there can be a difference between those two. Not always. There are definitely people who are both. But what we're looking for are academic economics students, not just, hey, I want a career in finance and I want to make all that big finance money. The two things are quite different. And we can tell in an application and an interview where that's the case, and those applicants tend not to be as successful as our nerdy academic economists. That is the smile of absolutely yes on Daria's face right now. Right. Let's ask. Someone's asked, I don't understand this question. Is it possible to have more than one Nash equilibria?
This was the question I asked before. Yes, actually, an example showed up. There are two of them, turns out. So basically, yeah, because both of them they could become. There are cases, of course, where there's only one, but it's all yet to come in your study. So you're gonna come, you learn all these differences and how to formally analyze it, not just create a story, just I've described. So don't worry, just wait.
Someone's also asked, this is another question I don't understand, are stochastic processes within the content for this course? I don't even know if I pronounced that right.
I do. It's stochastic is correct. No, actually, archaic British word. But yeah, I mean, okay. Short answer is that maybe. So the question is that there is some components of this between the second and third year, but it's not a formal course towards that. Because of course, stochastic processes is a very important mathematical tool to analyze time series and particularly financial data as an application. Getting onto that. There's all a theory about financial product and financial math, which has nothing to do with what you think about making money. It's actually a proper mathematical theory made by nerds, as we just discussed. So the two things can be very different. But what I'm saying is that there is no in the tripos. There's surely probably towards the last final year these things are introduced, but a formalism of these will certainly becomes at the master level, because also it's fairly advanced. It's a very, very advanced stuff. But it puts you on the right track for that, no worries.
One thing to note, more general from this. If the question is this thing included in the course? Go onto the economics website for Cambridge, and you'll find all the details of what is on the course, all the modules. You can even find yourselves reading lists for things that you can start to explore, a little bit of supercurricular study, things that might interest you, sorted by topics, so you can focus on the topics that do interest you. And that will give you a great idea of, A, is this course right for me? Does it cover all the stuff I want it to do? And two, hey, here's some ideas of things that I can geek out about over the summer and really enjoy. Someone's asked if are reading a particular book would be beneficial, Economic Analysis by Green. You could, but you could look at any parts of economics that interest you. If you're more macro, get macro. If you're more micro, really narrow in on that fine detail. Focus on whatever it is that you love. We're not judging you on which part of economics you're enjoying or what you have read. What we care is that you have read some stuff and what you got from it, and how that's influenced you, and how you gained the skills of the university-ready economics student from all of that. I think that's really key. So have a look at the Cambridge website. Do the same for any other unis you're considering as well. Make sure that course has all the things that you want in it. Really important. We are joined by Bruno. Thank you for joining us this evening. It's a little bit of a late one. He's going to join us for some more Q&A. While he gets himself settled here, I will do one or two more very quick admissionsy ones, and then we're going to talk about interviews because there's a lot. Someone's asked, how detrimental is an A in further maths prediction if all other subjects are an A star? Not necessarily. We're looking at your application holistically. We would certainly want to see an A star in the mathematics, with that being the case. And we would make our offers based on what we think is a fair offer for the individual. So it's not a deal breaker, but you will want to show us some math strength in the application, and that will certainly help. But though, as we said, doing further maths, that's already a good thing to be doing. Someone's asked, do you have to do economics for A/L to get in? Nope, you don't have to have an A level or any qualification in economics. You can be starting from scratch. Maths is the subject that you have to be doing. Maths is compulsory. Further maths, very preferable. But Dario, correct me if I'm wrong, we have plenty of people applying without economics. Some do, some don't. Not every school offers it. And someone's asked, is IB Maths IA at higher level sufficient to do economics? At Cambridge, it would not be. For mathematics, if you're taking the International Baccalaureate, we need analysis and approaches as the compulsory mathematics subject. That is the same across the board for all University of Cambridge subjects that require maths. So make sure you're taking the correct one there. Right, sorry, that was a couple of quick-fire admissions ones there. So we've had a few questions about supercurricular study and stuff that has been done around this. Bruno, take us, if you're happy to, take us a little bit about your experience, applying to Cambridge in economics and some of the things that you did to sort of get yourself ready for it.
The main thing is reading. I really agree with the on the Cambridge websites. There's the list of all the papers, and it gives you all the reading materials. Like I skimmed through a textbook that was really helpful for economics at undergraduate. Is very different from economics A level. So and like especially in microeconomics, I'd say. So it's quite helpful to skim through some textbooks, kind of to get an idea of what sort of what you're going to be covering. Like you kind of like if you come into it with an idea of like what indifference curves are, and like a kind of an understanding of utility. You don't have to, they'll teach this to you. You definitely don't have to do this, but it's very helpful, and also it prepares you for what sort of thing you're going to be learning. Also, it's a very interesting thing to approach. Other than that, have a rest over the summer because you're going to be very busy in your first few terms and throughout the year. So it's good that it's great. It would be good if you could come into it refreshed.
A good bit of advice. So let's talk about interviews here. So I'm also trying to type a couple of answers here. Actually, did you do the Tamua, Bruno?
I didn't do the Tamua. I did the cancelled ECAA.
One beforehand. Then I won't ask. Someone's asked if you do the A-level maths, is the Tamua difficult? We can't answer that one, having none of us, I don't believe, done A-level maths and the Tamua. Have a look at the specification and the syllabus. Have a look at the practice papers. I think the answer to that question depends on what type of mathematician you are and how you think around problems. It's not just about whether you're doing the subject. So someone who's doing A-level maths and getting a D probably is quite tricky. To someone who is a real problem solver and has very high math skills, it's probably somewhat easier. So a bit dependent on the individual. Cool. Let's talk about the economics interview. So what's the economics interview like for this college? And how can it differ a little bit between colleges as a common theme? It's certainly a question that has been posted multiple times here. Dario, let's start off with you on this one, and then we'll get Bruno to talk a little bit about his interview experience if he's happy. So the interview, what is the purpose of it? What are you trying to get from it? What is the interview kind of like? Is a good starting point.
So practically, I just more or less answered this during the question. Well, the point is very simple. What I'm trying to get out of this, I'm trying to, no, I mean, I'm not trying to get a person which has a degree already in economics and knows everything about economics, obviously, because there's no point otherwise of studying here. The point here is to making sure that, I get a person which, hey, has the quantitative, background, which should be able, not because, as I said, I have a preference or anything, but because the course is structured in this way. So we'll be able to cope the fast pace of the course, which will go through a lot of quantitative topics, not only quantitative, but mostly the grounding. Maybe Ruth can confirm the milestones of grounding or everything is more or less mostly quantitative. And as I said, the other thing, I don't need to know particular things. I mean, probably need to know surely some basic maths, maybe some derivatives would be nice to see. Even if we'll be trying to work it out, but at the end of the day, these are basics you need to know in order to approach an economics degree anywhere. But as I said, beyond that, this basic thing, I'm not looking for anything particular. I need a person which is eager to learn, wants to, and genuinely passionate about the subject, and tries to solve problems, tries to approach the problem. As I said, in an interview, you're not going to find questions you would know. So it's how it works, okay? But besides that, the idea is that you want to make sure that the person is interested and wants to tackle problems. That's the important thing. I'm trying to find a person which is interesting, person which will be able, which is, wants to try to figure out how things are working. Right? This is the important thing. And obviously has a reason out of it, not just trying to come up with an answer, hoping that the answer is right. Because majority of the case, we don't care about the answer. We care about the process. That's the most important thing that Bruno can confirm. I mean, when you're going to encounter, there are many problems you will encounter across your degree as well, which at the end of the day, you will not know the answer, but you will try and try again. And at the end of the day, this creates a creative mind to reach what eventually is the right answer, right?
I think it's really important, the thing you said there about it's not necessarily about the right answer. And that's a really hard thing when you're judged day in and day out at school about, did I get the right answer or not? What we're looking at is that process, how you're thinking, how you're trying to solve problems, how you're listening to the guidance that you're going to be getting from the interviewer. They're going to be coming in with little hints, little tips, little questions to get you to think around the subject and the problems that they are setting. So come in with some maths skills ready, but it's going to be about how you apply them to new situations and listen really carefully to what you're being asked and follow those hints. You're working with the interviewer, not against them. Dario is not sitting there trying to get you. Yeah, he is a genuinely lovely man that is trying to help you find the answers and work with you to get to that point, because that's how we see your true potential, how we can work with you to solve problems, to come up with answers, and most importantly, to enhance your understanding and reach your academic potential. And it really isn't the case that everyone learns best in this style of teaching, in this environment. This discussion, this dialogue is not for everybody. Different people learn in different ways. That's why we interview. That's why not everyone is successful. It doesn't mean that you're not smart. It doesn't mean that you're not brilliant. It just means that this may not be the place where you're going to get the most from it. And that's what we're looking to get from the interviews. Different people will have slightly different techniques. They like to ask different types of questions, but we're all drilling down for those exact same things that Dario was talking about right there. Yeah, don't worry about how things might be different. Come in ready for a challenge. Come in ready for a problem to solve, to think your way around it. Yeah, I think that's really important. Bruno, tell us a bit about your interviews, if you depending on how much you can remember, how long ago / traumatic it was. But if you're happy to share a bit, please bear in mind though, folks, Bruno's experience is just a singular one. It can vary quite considerably. So don't take this as pure gospel for absolutely everybody.
So I interviewed at St. Catherine's and was pulled to Homerton, which is a thing you find out about, is you will sometimes get moved to a different college to the one you applied to. So my interview specifically was split into two halves, and we had two people. And so you had an economics half and a mathematics half. So for the economics question, it was general. I got asked about negative interest rates, and what effect does that have on the economy. I got asked just about interest rates in general. I got that some examiners, interviewers seem to like this question, which is why are you choosing to study economics? So it's probably a good idea to think about that and what you would say to that. For the mathematics component, um, I was asked, so the mathematics component was more difficult. There were some terms that I didn't initially understand. What you need to realize is you can really just ask, you can ask questions, you can ask about anything, you can ask, okay, what does this mean? Like, for example, in my interview, there was a maximization function, and I didn't know what this was. I'd never come across this before, but I then was able to ask, and they explained to me what it was, and I was able to answer the question correctly. And it's just you just need to be willing to take a moment to think about things and be curious. And even if you don't get the correct, and as like you heard this a lot, even if you don't get the correct answer, the important thing is the thinking process and your howing and being engaged and willing to try this question. Yes.
That's huge advice there. That is huge. We're not expecting you to know the answers, as Dario said. We might even be introducing brand new concepts. We need someone who's open-minded and able to think through new ideas, who's got a critical eye. And I love, Bruno, that you said to take a moment to think. I think that is amazing advice. Too many people try to rush through an interview because they equate being fast with being smart. And that is not always the case. Taking a moment to think through your answer, structure it, not necessarily just blurt out the first thing that comes to mind before you've even thought through the idea. I'm sure Dario and I have both seen in many subjects, in many interviews, people fall into that trap. And just taking that moment, a couple of seconds, is really good advice.
Yeah, exactly the same things. I mean, we will ask you questions. I mean, the important thing is that you have to realize is that an interview has a certain amount of time and will keep you there for that amount of time. So what does it mean is that if you're fast, we ask you more questions. If you are slower, the slower means taking your time and understanding. We'll ask less questions. Doesn't mean the person answers more questions has more right to be, in than anybody else. Is the quality of the discussion. It's not the number. It's not how speed is not. We're not working on that. So.
I think that's really important. Someone's asked, how do you prepare for interview? Prepare a lot of maths questions or speak about supercurricular activities? I think, prepare some maths and start answering some puzzles and some things that, aren't just a straight maths questions, but get you to apply your knowledge. And talk about anything involving your subject. Work on explaining your ideas really clearly and really well. Practice practice giving us your thoughts out loud. We want to see how you think. And the terrible way I always have of putting it is you may be interviewed by a professor, but they will not be Professor X. They cannot read your mind. You need to explain your thought process out loud. Your maths teacher will have been going on at you for years and years about showing you're working out. Well, we want you to do that in your interview verbally, as well as if we've got a whiteboard or something like that. You might be sketching some things out or showing us that working out as well. I mean, Bruno, how did you prepare for your interviews? Obviously, you were successful, but what worked for you? How did you get yourself set?
So I what would be helpful is if you can find online, there's lots of lists of previous questions. What's quite helpful is getting like a parent or a friend to ask you some questions and just say it, just like which you haven't seen before, and seeing how you respond to that, just because that helps you get over the nerves of the interview. And just for preparation, I would say it's difficult to prepare for because questions come up that you weren't expecting. So the most important thing to prepare is your ability to adjust in the moment and engage with something you haven't seen before. It's not something you can learn every answer to every question and then go in and then reel off the answers you memorized.
Really great advice. Got a couple of really interesting ones that are coming up here just at the end of the list right now. How do you differentiate between someone who is relatively quiet and isn't particularly animated in the interview, compared to someone who is more confident or, brash or articulate in that sort of manner? And I think the answer to that is great students can be either of those things or even both at times. You can be confident and really getting in there and do well. You can be quiet and figuring things out, more slowly and quietly. But you've got to be able to give an answer and explain your thoughts. We're not looking for one type of person or another. We're not looking for the introvert or the extrovert or anything in between. We're looking for the economist. And those people, economists can be all of those things. So be you. If you're quiet and reserved, make sure that you push yourself to explain those ideas and don't get caught in that anxiety and nervousness. But we'll be able to see that. We'll be able to sense that. We are human beings. If you're brash and confident, great. Don't be overconfident. Don't get cocky. Think through your answers. Don't go too fast. Yeah. What we're looking for is that potential. And we have done, between Darrow and myself, hundreds and hundreds of interviews. Yeah. We are trained in reading people, in knowing when people are nervous. We may ask you a couple more questions at that point to get you out of your shell. Fine, wonderful. Listen and respond, and know that we're not judging you based on that. We're judging you based on your potential as an economics student. Anything else you want to add on that front, Darren, in terms of like anxiety or people's worries about how they come across in an interview?
No, I mean, to be honest, as you mentioned, at the end of the day, like, it's our job also to put you in the conditions where you can actually do this. Of course, it's an interview, right? So, at the end of the day, we'll have to, assess and evaluate something. But clearly, there's no real distinction, because at the end of the day, we always try. I mean, we don't have, one question, and either is that you answer now immediately, boom, and that's it. No, I mean, it's an interview, right? An interview is a process. It's a process which is tailored regarding the type of person. We clearly don't have to feel in any way that the person which is the most chatty will actually go through and the quiet one doesn't. We have among our students plenty of different type of people, and what we want is just to get the right person which are suitable for the course, which are among the best. And the best is not because the best is what we want, it's just because effectively it's a competitive process. And at the end of the day, of course, we need to make a choice. But at the end of the day, the important thing is that you are the one which can actually achieve something, and this course is right for you. And this is the important point that we are trying to do. So at the end of the day, don't worry. There's no real distinction in any way.
Wise words. A couple of quick admissions ones here. Someone said, if my school forces us to take maths in year 12, will that affect my application? No, please don't worry. It's entirely normal. Quite a regular thing we see is that schools say to do all of maths in year 12 and all of further maths in year 13, and that's absolutely fine. What we're looking for is the equivalent of 3 or 4 A levels across 2 years, and we will take that into account as we look at the application. So it's not a problem at all. You won't be the only school for whom that's happening. A few people are asking about grades that we might offer. All offers are based on the individual. So, we can't tell you what your offer might be at this stage. We don't have a standard offer other than saying that our typical minimum offer is 2 A stars and an A in economics. We can tie A stars to certain subjects if we think it's appropriate, but that is done on an individual case-by-case basis. Don't worry. At this stage, don't even think about it. Get your application as strong as you can, do as well as you can, and worry about the offer if and when you get one. And if you do get an offer from Cambridge, whatever that offer says, what you've got at that point is incentive. What you've got at that point is a target, and you know exactly what you need to do. And if it says that you need to get an A level, A star in a certain subject, then you're going to work your backside off to make sure you get it right, because you just got an offer from blooming Cambridge. So don't put the cart before the horse. Don't start worrying about that just yet. If you think you can get A's and A stars in those A levels, that's when to think about making that application and making it as strong as you can. And one more I will take for the moment. Do you cater for people who are neurodiverse? And the answer to that is yes, absolutely. So where somebody has got any type of need, whether it's a learning need, whether someone is neurodiverse, we can put in place all sorts of things to make sure that we're making things as easy as possible. We've got our ADRC, which is all about accessibility, disability. They can put in place individual plans for students for their teaching to make sure that their teachers, their supervisors know what will work best for them. Within college, we have our tutorial and wellbeing team who are doing a lot of work in terms of neurodiversity. Within Homerton, specifically at the moment, we've got a lot of things going on. We have our own ADHD and ASD clinic, which we've been working with on site. We're doing, I've personally been involved with doing a lot of work in neurodiversity in the college, trying to change some of the general things in the college to make them more friendly for students with some form of neurodivergence. So it's something that we are not perfect at yet, and nobody is. But at the very least, I can speak for Homerton to say is we are making a lot of strides and a lot of improvements on that front. And there is more happening as we go on through that. But being neurodivergent in Cambridge is not uncommon. And there are, many people who are, who may not even be aware of it that suddenly doing that. So, yeah, don't be worried. You love your subject. If you're someone who obsesses over that subject, there are plenty of those people in Cambridge. Absolutely. How many attempts do you have in the Tamur test? You have the one for that year. Nice and simple. We're judging that year's assessment. Right, let's see what else we have. Oh, and do heavy sporting commitments which affected time in school get considered during admissions? No. We want you to hit the academic foundations that we need. I'm not looking at your extracurricular activities. I'm not going to be making any judgments based on that, and I would not be changing our academic requirements because someone is doing, Olympic level sports or anything like that. We're still going to expect the same. This is an academic university. We're concerned with your academic potential, not other things that you are doing. Sorry about that. Actually, I don't apologize for that. That's how we operate. It's how it should be. Right. So a bit of a general one here, Daria. What would a strong application look like to you? I know it's a bit of a broad one and brings in some of the things that we've been looking at overall. There's a nice sort of summary point here.
I mean, saying this over and over and over. It's not the person which comes to me and is trying to sell me his future career in finance or anything. He's not the person which is the quickest at answering and he is a very chatty and engaging type of person. He's not the person who tells me all the various experience he had into finance and anything related. He's a person which comes, show me an interest in the subject, talks to me about a topic which is interesting in economics, or is trying to have an interesting or a critical opinion about the topic we propose, and tries generally to try solve the problem, and is literally trying to frame the problem into a framework, try to put on the condition, what happens if this happens, what happens if this happens, and it talks me through this, and talks me through his reasoning. And as I said, doesn't matter if it's correct or wrong, it's what I care is the reason, right?
Bruno, here's a good one for you. Someone's asked, I like this one. What do you think is the best part of the course? What do you like most about your degree?
I was halfway through typing an answer to that.
Oh,
So what I most enjoy about it is you have a greater understanding of what's currently going on in the world and the news. The degree is really helpful for understanding various things. Like the example this year, I took a paper on public economics, which is all about tax policy and environmental regulation. And this is really helpful for just when you see in the news something discussing about all the tax options faced by Labour, you understand what Rachel Reeves is going through a lot more. And then you understand on the micro side as well, about the dumping of sewage in the Thames and the issues around that and the issues of privatization. So it changes the way you read the news and the way you interface with the world, which has been really interesting.
Question that's come up a couple of times here. And this is quite a basic one, Daria, but it'd be worth just a little bit of discussion here. What's the difference in the map between maths and economics? Because the course does have some heavy mathematics elements. And I know this is a very broad and general one, but it's come up a couple of times here. And there's a few people who I think are deciding between maths and econ here.
I mean, it's very simple because the maths, it is purely maths. So what it matters is the understanding of the mathematical tools and in depth of the logic behind the maths, but there's no actual interpretation and motivation. We're not trying to test all the possible mathematical objects in the world, something very abstract. We're trying to do something which is concrete. And then mathematics we learn because we use it. We can actually use it for something. It doesn't mean that there's maths we haven't used so far, which could still be useful to describe things, as what the recent Nobel Prizes in economics have actually developed. But the point here is the fact that what we need at this level is just what we teach you is actually maths with a purpose. Even though, since this is the purpose, doesn't mean it's less rigorous, right? It's still rigorous, and we still believe in it. Because, of course, to use complex problems, we need to understand them very deeply. That's it.
Yeah, and it's that purpose and that impact on the world.
Yeah,
that I think is key. couple of quick ones here. We're not going to be able to answer all these questions, by the way. We've still got loads of questions open. We've only got 5 minutes left this evening. Someone said, if the interview doesn't go well, can we still get an offer based on the qualifications, the rest of the application? The answer is yes, to an extent. It depends how badly the interview does go. But if you've got a strong application overall with strong grades and predictions and a very strong Tamura score, you could have an interview that isn't quite as strong as some others and still get a place. But really, again, don't worry about it. Prepare, do as well as you can on every single part of the application. We're not expecting everything to be perfect, but the better you can do, the better chances that you're getting in terms of that. Someone's asked, if I've done programs or competitions for other colleges, will that disadvantage me for a different college? And the answer is no. You can certainly mention them in your personal statement. There's nothing wrong with giving credit, but we're not going to be judging you based on who it was, just like we wouldn't be judging you based on which books you've read and whether we like those books or not. So it's absolutely fine to mention, just because you're applying to Homerton, but you've done a course through Fitzwilliam College, I don't know. Fine, cool. Even if you've done one through the dreaded Oxford, we'd still be very happy because you're doing more economic stuff and they're actually brilliant as well. So yeah, don't worry about that. This is a good one here. I heard it's not the supercurriculars that are important, but what you do with them, like analysing them, forming your opinion. How do we do this? I'm struggling about this. How can we approach doing that? I think that's a really good question. I might get Bruno to come in on this in a second as well. I think the key thing here is, as I said, we care about you, not the thing that you've read in and of itself. So try asking yourself some key questions. What did I learn from this? What about this made me really inspired or more enthusiastic about economics? Which ideas did I think were great and why? Which ones did I think were awful and should get in the metaphorical C and why? Yeah, how is this starting to shape me as an economist? Because it's you that I'm trying to get to know and that Dario is trying to get to know through that personal statement, not the things that you've read. I mean, Dario, Bruno, any other thoughts on this one?
You want to go first? Yeah, go.
Okay, yes. Yes, so in your personal statement, your interview, like the person who's considering you already will know the things you're talking about. You don't need to explain it to them. What you're focusing on is how is specifically your interaction with the literature and with what you've come across. So rather than just having like a shopping list of what you've come across and then like an understanding of how they works, you can talk about how that shaped your interest or and you can link them to what would be really good is trying to link various things you've come across and various approaches and how they can conflict, because there is a lot of conflict in economics in the various approaches which are taken. So yes, it's very important to situate yourself throughout and go, this is what my stance on this is, or this is how this has changed my opinions.
Barry, anything else you want to add?
I think it's exactly that. No, I mean, this is the most important, really strongly valuable, because at the end of the day, the matter is to make sure you're genuine in your story. You're trying to connect things. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what effectively you do, even when you pose a question or anything. But, your experience in trying to see how this can be valuable, particularly towards what potentially you would gonna do with your economics degree or anything related. And, this is the type of things that we are actually interested in at the end of the day, creating this type of connection, just throwing things there, the typical things, I need, money or anything, This is type of things which are, how these things are interlinked and having a real story. And to be honest, if you're passionate about this, eventually comes, because at the end of the day, we'll talk through, we'll discuss about, introduce your experience, you introduce a problem, and eventually putting this connection in with this really help it making that real story, right?
Okay, I think we are fast running out of time. We've got 1 minute to go. I think in which case we're going to go for one final question, which I'm going to ask to both of the two of you. If you had one piece of advice, one thing that you would want, someone who is thinking of studying economics at Cambridge to know, what would it be? Maybe we've mentioned it before, and we just want to put a special focus on it. Maybe something different, one last little pearl of wisdom that we want to give folks here today. But what would be that one thing that you would want to express? Bruno, maybe to your past self in terms of having come in here and studying economics, I'm padding for time while I get you to think about this, because I realise that is a nasty little question to leap on the both of you at the end. Bruno, are you happy to go? Actually, I can do a quick one first, and then that gives you some time if you're not ready. Or are you ready?
I'd appreciate a bit of time.
In which case, I think one of the most important things to do is, don't sweat the small stuff when it comes down to this. You cannot game this system, and I'm sure the economic impulse is to try and game the system. We've designed this in a way that isn't. There are lots of things that are outside of your control. There are lots of things that you don't know how they are going to go, and you cannot predict it. Prepare well. Take the Tamua seriously. Prepare well in terms of your interview. Practice talking about things, showing the working out. Everything that we have been saying has been solid gold advice. Go back and re-watch this video afterwards. It will be uploaded onto our YouTube channel. And I'm not sure if it gets emailed out, but we've had a couple of people ask about the recording. I will post the link in the chat while the other two are asking, so you can bookmark the channel, like, share, and subscribe maybe, so you can get this content ready for it, so you can come back over it again. But prepare well, take it seriously, and don't try and game the system, because you're just wasting your energy that you could be putting into preparation that will serve you better. Bruno.
I would say a good idea is to really appreciate the interview. You get you've clearly very interested in the subject. You get to talk to a world expert in the subjects for half an hour. Like, I would really encourage you to think about what you want to know, or if there's a particular subject you like to talk to about them, I'd really encourage bringing that up, because not only is it something that you're going to find very interesting, that also shows the interviewer that you're interested in this topic, and also it shows what specific parts of the course you want to pursue. It's a really good opportunity. Like, you can bring stuff up in the interviews and ask them questions, and then that will start a conversation which is both really interesting and highlights how what your interests are and how you pursue economics.
Wonderful. Dario, for the final word, what would be your key bit of advice?
Take your time and enjoy it. Simple as that. Because at the end of the day, it's important what we said. We said this is very important. Prepare, take it. Don't try to outsmart it. Not try to cheat the system. Try to think. So try to take it as a necessary process that goes through, and be genuine about this. Because at the end of the day, people that tries too much, they try to again outsmart the system to show something they're not. They are eventually if for everybody things would go well. If they don't go well, there's also reasons why it doesn't. And reason is, as I said, is something to do with your personal career later. This is, as I said, is every place does it differently. We do it in a way, and we try to get the best person which are for our way. And our way is not good for everybody. And that doesn't mean that this person, they're not going to be, successful in their life. And maybe they're super successful, just it's not their way. So trust the system, try to be genuine, and try to enjoy it.
Sage advice indeed. I'm sorry that we weren't able to answer every single question. There were just far too many to get through today. But most importantly, right now, we hope this session has been useful, maybe even enjoyable. And I need to give massive thanks to both Bruno and to Dario for joining us and spending time with us this evening. Thank you all for coming along as well. We're going to close out the session there. We wish you a wonderful evening and the very best of luck with any and all of your applications that you're making in the coming years. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you, folks.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.